I've mentioned quite a few times on this channel that as far as Star Wars action figures, I am an original trilogy purist, and my goal has been to own every original trilogy 3 and 3/4 figure. And sometimes they come with really big accessories, like in the case of this deluxe figure. Or sometimes they come with other figures, like this Darth Vader figure that came with two prequel Anakin figures. And usually, most of the time, I don't need the accessories, whether it's a Hoth gun, prequel figures, or even this Naboo spaceship to get that droid. All right, I know he wasn't original trilogy, but he was a cool red droid. And at the time, we had very few astromech droids. All right, well, along comes Power of the Jedi, following up Power of the Force 2, and we got an interesting release. It was a figure that came with one of the largest accessories to date, the carbon freezing chamber. And what a figure it was, or rather, shouldn't have been. Quite obviously potentially the worst figure in the entire modern line, and especially compared to its peers in Power of the Jedi, this figure really stuck out as being obsolete and old. I mean, it didn't just look like an old Kenner figure. Where did this belong? I mean, obviously we got many figures that were redone over the years, and Bespin guards have been redone as well. In fact, in Power of the Jedi, we got one of the better Bespin guards. So why is it the carbon freezing chamber set was even released for collectors? Well, there have been a lot of Bespin City, Cloud City playsets over the years, Carbonite Freezing Chamber playsets. I mean, not every Cloud City playset is the Carbonite Freezing Chamber, but a lot of them are because, well, it's a lot of where the action happened. Not only does Han get frozen and taken away by Boba Fett, but Luke has his big duel with Darth Vader. And while we got a sort of ultimate version of this playset in the Vintage Collection, although granted you had to buy two of them and put them together, and it did come with a Rogue One Stormtrooper on an Empire Strikes Back card. Yes, check the chest plate, it's wrong for Empire, but that's not important right now. Well, this giant accessory that came with a very sort of dull figure was one of those purchases that you kind of made regrettably. It came with a really interesting action feature for the kids. You can see on the left there, I'm sorry, your right, my left, the before and after shot of that carbonite chamber where you could freeze anyone you wanted. And yes, I know that's not how carbonite freezing works, but for kids it was a really cool feature. You'd put the figure in, and you could recreate those scenes on Bespin where you could see the figure sort of poking through the mesh of the carbonite block that was made of cloth, and it would pop out the top. Really, really cool action features for kids. And with such a heavy kid focus, including blast guns that shot projectiles and, all sorts of cool kid features, shouldn't this have wound up at Toys R Us and shouldn't have had a better figure than this guy? I mean, he doesn't even look like a Power of the Jedi figure. It definitely doesn't feel like he belongs, collector only. Maybe he's this guy? I don't know. It's kind of hard to find reference when you have sort of such an oddly sculpted figure. He doesn't really even look like he fits in with the vintage line, the retro line, the one from Kenner back in the 80s. And I don't know. I just don't remember seeing a guy look like that in the content. I mean, there was an Asian guy, which is why we got an Asian guard. But if you look at some of the sort of slightly earlier Power of the Force 2 figures, you'll realize where this figure fits in. He very much looks like earlier releases in the modern Hasbro line, and that's exactly what he is. This is a holdover. It was a figure that was designed years earlier, which is why he looks like earlier figures, but it couldn't find a home. So it's one of those toys that gets pitched to all these different retailers looking for a home, and just nobody takes it, and somehow it falls through the cracks and winds up getting tooled. Well, when you have something that's tooled and you don't have a retailer, one of the best ways to get rid of it, or to pay off the tooling, is to sell it to collectors, and this was done through the Star Wars Insider magazine. So you got everything you see here, including projectiles and carbonite block with felt top for kiddies, but it was only sold online, and it was only sold through the fan club, which means the ideal audience for it wasn't really playing with it, and collectors were just turning it into a source of a diorama, which is what collectors do with playsets, right? It's basically like a carbonite chamber-shaped dollhouse, if you will. The same way the sail barge is a sail barge-shaped dollhouse. So you could have a lot of fun with this as a diorama, and you got your very first Bespin guard figure in the modern line, since it predated the Power of the Jedi version, and we would continue to get better and better versions of the Bespin guard as years went by, although we really kind of had odd ones, including, yes, we had the Asian character who's seen in the very background, and we even had a figure of this guy who doesn't even show up in the movie, but just in cut footage. So getting a good Bespin guard was going to really have to wait until the vintage collection, where we finally got updates of the original Kenner guards, the black one and the white one being the guy with the mustache. Until then, though, our very first Bespin guard was this guy who just didn't fit with any of the other current figures. I mean, he clearly looks like a Power of the Force figure, not Power of the Jedi. And while this is due to having to shop around the set and find a home for it, at least it helped us expand our collection and get our first ever diorama for Bespin. I guess there's a silver lining with everything? Maybe?